Hey everybody, Max Aita here, head weightlifting coach for Team Juggernaut, bringing you a video series on programming for weightlifting. This is the first video in our series, and it covers long-term planning. So when we talk about training plans and programs, a lot of times we're talking about the initial training cycle or the next training block or training week. But really what we do when we're talking about programming, especially for weightlifting, which is a complex sport, we want to talk about and think about long-term planning. And what long-term planning really does for us is separates the idea of training for goals, specific numbers, and training for the process or going through the process of training. So we're going to focus on process orientation versus goal orientation with long-term planning. Process orientation basically just means that we're focusing on the smallest, simplest aspects day to day, week to week, month to month that we can influence and get better at, rather than focusing on, hey, I've got to meet in 6 weeks or 6 months, I've got to hit this number or that number, and then building a training cycle or training program to get you to that number. The reason that long-term planning is superior to short-term or intermediate-term planning is that we're not exhausting ourselves cycle to cycle trying to hit some arbitrary number at a meet. We're planning for where do we need to be in 6 months? Where do we need to be in 8 months or in 10 months or a year or 2 years or 3 years? If you started weightlifting at the age of 20 and you focused on where you'd be at 25, your training would look different those first couple years than if you started at 20 and decided that by 21 I've got to be at the Olympic Games. So understand that long-term planning is really just a way to really lay the groundwork for how we look at training and how we actually approach the individual aspects that are gonna go into a training program. There's two distinct periods in every lifter's career that we focus on with long-term planning. Now this encompasses the entirety of from the day you start to the day you're done lifting. And those two periods are basically distinguished by what qualities and what things are being developed and what landmarks we're looking to achieve in those periods. So the first period of training and long-term process is what we would call like this developmental period. And it's characterized by a steady growth of total volume year after year up to a point at which the volume plateaus. This is going to last generally the first 3 to 5 to 6 years or so. So year after year, volume is growing for the athletes, so the total number of reps they do in a whole year is going to increase as they train. The main reasons for this are that it allows us to hit certain landmarks in training. And those landmarks in that period are going to be building an athlete's general foundation, their GPP, their general fitness, developing and solidifying technique, so making sure that the lifter knows how to do the classic lifts perfectly. They're able to learn and execute all of the exercises that are in the training program. They understand the technique. There's nothing they're missing. The other landmarks are going to be maximizing the lifter's muscle mass and then maximizing their body weight class. So that first period of growth and volume is really a matter of getting that lifter up to the technical standard they need to be, getting them to the muscle mass required and the weight class they should be. If after 6 years of training let's say you're 6 feet tall, but you weigh 73 kilos, you haven't maximized muscle mass, you're in the wrong weight class, you're too tall for that class. So those 6 years should have been spent growing volume, building up, getting to the point where when you hit that level of having reached the maximum volume you're going to train with, you filled out your weight class. You put on the muscle necessary and you're in the right weight class. And then finally, and this is more of a qualitative aspect to the training process, but that initial period of training, because it's not focused on results, it's focused on process. It's focused on the idea that you're going to grow into your training. You're going to add volume as you go. You're going to work on technique and develop your skills, develop the ability to do the lifts, and then grow the physical qualities from a general standpoint. We want to also develop a positive relationship with training and competition in that early period. And that really just kind of means that lifters are going to do training and competitions from a standpoint of not worrying about the outcome, but focusing on the process, focusing on showing up to meets, understanding how they go, understanding how they're supposed to perform, understanding the demeanor, you know, what your attitude should be towards competition. All these things should be fostered in a way that it creates a positive mental outlook for athletes. We don't want to have a situation where in this initial period of training, this initial first years of training, we focused only on the results someone's going to get, how good they are as a lifter, you know, hitting the biggest total possible at the lightest possible body weight, you know, cutting weight to make those classes, not worrying about technique, but focusing on weight on the bar, and not having any kind of GPP foundation, not building up for the sake of having huge results at the end of their career, but just getting what we can out of them now. So that's the first period of training in long-term preparation for us. We want to focus on those volume landmarks, or sorry, those landmarks that are important, and then establish things from the ground up in a way that we're going to have the best possible results later on in our career. Now, some specifics of how this process goes. The growth of volume from year to year should occur in an organic way. There's really two things here that we have to think about. Volume should be added to the individual workouts within a week before we add sessions to the week. Then the second would be adding sessions once the volume of any one session becomes a little bit too large to recover from. The reason we do this is because if we just keep adding more and more sessions per week, frequency increases, fatigue is going to get a little bit worse. People are going to start focusing more on you know, doing another session or doing double days or increasing these things that really aren't necessary. We want to focus on getting the most out of each quality workout we can before adding the next session. Now that might not mean a lot. If we're increasing total volume year after year after year by only 10% or so, 10 to 15%, that's not a lot of extra work each day. That might be a couple of extra sets every training cycle. You know, when you repeat your cycle, you might add a few sets to some of those major workouts. And as time goes on, you go more and more to the point that 3 workouts a week maybe isn't enough anymore. You can't, the workouts become too big, so you add a 4th day. That 4th day starts out pretty small. Some of the volume from other days goes into that 4th day, and you build again from there until you need a 5th day, and then build again from there until you need a 6th day, and so on. The second stage of long-term development is what we could call the high sport mastery stage. Really just the competitive stage is how I think of this. This is characterized after you've reached that limit of volume you're going to do, and that's plateaued, and you've stabilized at a certain amount of volume per year. There's going to be a slight reduction of total volume year after year in exchange for a steady growth of average weight lifted. So the main thing here is that once we've achieved these landmarks of we've filled our weight class out, we're doing enough volume, or we're doing the most volume we can in training years, we've hit, you know, the most number of sessions in a week we're going to do. Once these things have stabilized, then our process shifts to this competitive stage where we reduce that volume slightly year after year in exchange for bringing up the intensity of the total training. The reason for this is that we know results are going to be most dependent on the amount of weight you lift, the amount of weight, the average weight of the barbell in training. That number's got to slowly increase, you know, across that yearly cycle, across multiple years, if you want to achieve high results. The training landmarks for this second competitive stage or high sport mastery stage are going to be a maximization of performance in competition. We want to make sure that we're focused and able to actually achieve our best results on the platform where it counts. And our goal should be focused on that. Our process should be focused on making ourselves the best weightlifters we can here. The second landmarks are going to be maximizing the physical qualities of lifters. So we want to become as strong as possible. We want to make sure that we're not allowing any of those weaknesses or anything that maybe wasn't developed flawlessly, or maybe if we have a deficiency still from the last phase of training, that early stage of training, we maximize that. We eliminate that still further in this stage of training. And then finally, the development of a competitive mindset. Again, kind of like earlier we talked about the positive mental aspect and the positive relationship with training and competition. This is kind of not the opposite, because it doesn't mean that negativity should be associated with competition, but we want to develop a competitive mindset that allows lifters to achieve the best results on platform. We want to be competitive. We want to be able to have lifters go into competitions knowing what the objective is, knowing what the weights they need to hit are, and knowing how to compete, knowing how to deal with adversity. If you miss lifts or, on platform, to come back from that and to fight. The goal here, again, because we're in this later stage of our training, we're close to our career peak, we need to have a little more aggressive mindset. And so fostering that in this period is a little bit more important to us. It's not something we wanted to develop early because it's going to slow us down. But now is a time to where we can really push these results, push this on our lifters in a positive way still, but focusing on results and goals as a primary thing. How are these landmarks achieved in the second stage, this high sport mastery stage? The growth of the average weight should also be an organic process, and it's achieved via a decrease in number of low intensity lifts, meaning we're doing less volume with lighter weights, less volume of warm-up weights, less volume in that 50, 60, 70, 80% range in exchange for more lifts in higher intensity ranges. We're also achieving this increase in average weight by a reduction of GPP as a percentage of training. That means that where the same athlete in the earlier stage of training was doing perhaps 20 or 30 or 50% of their total volume as GPP exercises, now this more advanced lifter is going to be doing maybe 10, 15, 20% of their total volume in GPP exercises. It's a reduction on a relative scale and a reduction on absolute scale, simply because we're doing less volume in this later stage of development. And then the natural reduction of weaknesses increases the average weight used during specific exercises. Early growth of general strength qualities also facilitates this. More qualified lifters have stronger absolute numbers, or have higher absolute strength numbers. If you're squatting 300 kilograms, the average weight of the barbell when you do 70% squats is higher than someone who squats 200 kilograms. So as you get stronger, the average weight, the absolute weight on the bar, will go up. And as lifters get more advanced, they get stronger and in proportion to the actual classic exercises. So there's a natural process to this average weight growing during the latter stage of long-term development that we want to encourage and also focus on as we get into the later points of this stage. So in summary, long-term planning should be focused on the complete picture of an athlete's career. From the beginning to the end, from the day they start to the day they end, we want to have this idea that there's landmarks we're going to hit. We're going to do our best to foster an organic growth to this process where volume increases first, general qualities increase first. We emphasize technical mastery and positive competition attitude, positive attitude toward training, in addition to developing muscle mass and filling out our weight class to the point that we're at a stage that we can then start implementing the second stage of training, which is more aggressive in competition, more focus and fixation on the actual results in competition and achieving high results in the sport. Thanks for watching this first installment in our multi-part series on programming for weightlifting. Stay tuned for the next in our video series.